Hello, this is the McAllister Gaming Society Hour. I'm your host, James Goings.
And I'm Matthew Davids.
And we're here to talk about gamer culture and what that means to you in the current day. Let's do a little bit of introductions first. My name, as I said earlier, is James Goings. I'm a first year here at McAllister, and my history with gaming goes back to when I was in 6th grade. I got a PS3 with my hard-earned cash. My first game that I ever played with that was, Star Wars The Force Unleashed, which I still hold up as a quality game. You got to unleash the power of the midi-chlorians upon those less fortunate. What about you, Matt?
My name is Matthew, as you well know, and my first foray into gaming came about probably 10 years ago or so when my parents got me the original Xbox for Christmas, and I don't remember exactly which games I played first, but my favorite one back then was Lego Star Wars. I remember my favorite part was I was able to play it with my brother. Could always play co-op with him.
All right, I'm sensing a theme here, and that's Star Wars, which is also something that we might be talking about on this show. It's not just about video games or role-playing games that you might play on a table. We're also going to talk a little bit about, gamer culture. But so I guess let me talk a little bit about the way that this show is going to work. Now that we have introductions out of the way, we're going to start with a little bit of news that has cropped up in the gaming world throughout the past week. After that, we're going to have a Song of the Week feature while Matt and I get ready for what is going to be our topic for this week's show. And the topic of this week's show is we're going to be talking about DLC, that's downloadable content, and the price of admission in video games today. After that, we'll do a pitch for games that we're currently playing, might even tie in to our topic at hand, that is DLC, and that'll be our show. So let's get things running right away, and that is the news. First piece of news that has cropped up in this last week is, let's start by prefacing this. Kojima, famous Japanese video game developer, who had a long-standing relationship with Konami making Metal Gear games and the like, has left quite publicly and formed a new studio and partnership over at Sony with Kojima Productions, and has announced at DICE just last week, along with our favorite filmmaker Del Toro of Pacific Rim and Pan's Labyrinth fame, that they plan on collaborating in the future, creating games. This is coming to light. Matt, did you ever play the game PT?
No, I can't say I did. I didn't have a PS3 for the brief months that it was out.
The brief months, yeah. I have it on my PS4 still because I managed to download it right before the licensing for it ran out. For those of you that don't know, PT, I believe that stood for Playable Teaser, although that was never explicitly stated. What PT was a very, very simple game. It was a scary game that Kojima and Del Toro had made collaboratively to, as I said, it was a playable teaser to tease the fact that they were going to be rebooting, I guess is the right word, the Silent Hill franchise with Silent Hills. And they were even going to work with Norman Reedus from Walking Dead, of the famous meme, "What Would Daryl Do?" I read the comics, so I'm more of a comic purist when it comes to Walking Dead. But for those of you who like Daryl in the TV show, that's Norman Reedus. So the three of them are going to work together and make Silent Hills. But when Kojima's relationship with Konami went south, Silent Hills got the rug pulled from underneath it, and Del Toro swore he would never work in video games again. But Kojima announced that he's creating his own studio with Sony, and they're back together. So I'm really excited to see what they put forth, because I'm a big fan of Kojima and I'm a big fan of Del Toro. So I only foresee good things coming out of this.
Well, I mean, that's certainly true. Another thing to note is just how bad Kojima's relationship with Konami was. I mean,
my God.
It was long and drawn out over several months. There were legal battles between them. Mm-hmm. Kojima wasn't allowed to receive awards at the Game Awards.
Yeah, at the Game Awards, I saw that live. There was a really that speech was not planned. The speech, the host of the Video Game Awards gave a speech. Very good friends with Kojima.
Jeff Naley.
Yep. That was not planned ahead of time, and I believe what award did the Phantom Pain win? Was it Best Adventure Game?
I don't quite remember. It was at least Best Adventure Game, if not Best Overall Game.
No, Best Overall was The Witcher, the new Witcher game. CD Projekt Red won developer for that as well. But whatever it was right before Kojima would have been able to accept that award, or right after, and said, Konami, the terms of Konami's contract with Kojima, for some reason or another, prevented him from going and accepting that award. So, yeah, I'm very excited to see what Kojima is able to do now that he is no longer in the shadow of gloom that Konami has managed to spread.
As a matter of fact, I mean, Konami has sort of moved out of AAA development entirely. They're started moving towards pachinko machines, as well as just mobile gaming primarily, which is a big change from this incredible company that used to make all the Metal Gear games. And
yeah, but so yeah, I don't really feel bad for Konami. Very excited for Kojima. Speaking of things that I'm excited for, our next news piece that we are covering is that Assassin's Creed, everyone's favorite annualized video game, is, at least for the next year, not going to be annualized. Assassin's Creed is skipping a title in 2016. After the critical failure, I guess, is a
critical
way
and technical failure
of putting it nicely, of Assassin's Creed Unity. That released in 2014. 2015 here, they released Assassin's Creed Syndicate, which was actually good. I have not played it. I have heard. I don't have enough money to sink $60 into a brand new game, as I'm sure most of you listening can, you agree with that sentiment anyway, it's neither here nor there. I've heard very good stuff about Syndicate. I'm assuming that the decision to not release an Assassin's Creed game was made after Unity dropped. Syndicate was probably far enough along the development track that they saw that through to the end, but I'm willing to bet that after that last endeavor, Ubisoft was going to just sort of take a break, do some quality control assessment. The fact that Assassin's Creed is skipping 2016, that started as a rumor that was leaked by, as all video game leaks are leaked, by Kotaku, but was later confirmed by a developer issuing a statement. But at the same time that Kotaku leaked that, hey, Assassin's Creed isn't coming out with a game in 2016, they also leaked that the next game might be set in Egypt. As in, you might be chilling with the pharaohs and...
I feel like in Assassin's Creed, chilling with the pharaohs is a lot less likely than killing the pharaohs.
Well, I mean, Ubisoft is doing this thing where I guess they're really buying into taking history way back. Far Cry Primal, coming out this year, that's going to be new and refreshing. And I think taking a year off is only going to be a good thing for the Assassin's Creed franchise. I mean, and it's not really like Assassin's Creed in terms of marketing is taking the year off, because we've got the Fassbender movie coming up. That's a topic for another time. Video games as movies, I believe. I mean, it can't be. I'm assuming I believe it's not going to be that bad, right?
It could absolutely be that bad, and likely will be. Although Michael Fassbender will put in a good performance, as he always does.
He killed it as Steve Jobs. I'm sure that'll translate well to stabbing people with hidden blades in the Middle East.
As far as video games concerned, I would say that there's been sort of a renaissance of older games that have been coming out soon. I mean, I remember several years back that all that you would see are these run-of-the-mill World War II shooters, and then suddenly Call of Duty comes out with COD 4, Modern Warfare, critical success, absolutely fantastic, and really after that day, just all of the shooters started being all of these sort of modern-day things or futuristic things, and now Far Cry Primal is starting to go back in time. Egypt, again, I'm assuming they're not going to be doing modern-day Egypt.
No, I mean the leak. The leak has it. Yeah, that it's going back in the time of the pyramids and the pharaohs and whatnot. This, if rumors are to be true, this is the furthest back in history an Assassin's Creed game has yet to be set.
I mean, that's also the first time that Assassin's Creed has gone back in time. As far as I know, Assassin's Creed seems to be very much progressing linearly through the games, where it sort of gets higher and higher.
Black Flag was a prequel, in the sense that it went back in time from the Revolutionary War in the U.S. back to the time of piracy. But you're correct though that for the most part it has been a progression forward through time. Syndicate, yes, you're right. Syndicate is the newest in the timeline. I really hope that they don't try and shoehorn in. They essentially had a grappling hook in Syndicate, very much like what Batman would have in any of the Arkham games. So I really hope that they don't try and justify having that in Egypt.
I mean, moving it back to the Arkham games would be pretty good, in my opinion.
Okay, we're getting off task. Let's get to our final piece of news that is, quite incidentally, actually quite on purpose, also a segue into our feature. If you are listening and you own Fallout 4, but have not seen to it that you have bought the season pass yet, I strongly encourage you to do so if you do intend to at some point own the season pass, because as of March 1st, Bethesda is raising the price of the season pass from $29.99, $30 to $49.99, $50. It is going up $20 in price. And let's talk about that for a little bit. Essentially, what happened is, up until this point, when they announced that the price would be going up, they also announced what was going to be in it, at least at first. And up until this point, we didn't know what exactly was going to be in the season pass. Now we do. There's going to be what's called the Wasteland Workshop add-on. What that does is you're able to capture NPCs and wildlife, so, I mean, death claws and stuff like that, and you can host tournaments of death, enter the Thunderdome. But the big expansion that they've announced that's coming in May it's called Far Harbor. It takes place in Maine, and it reminds me a lot of the Fallout 3 expansion that was zombie-based. Do you remember what that expansion was called? It came out after Into the Pit, I believe, and it also, I believe, took place in Maine and had zombies. Not that Far Harbor is as well planning on having zombies. Actually, I can tell you exactly what it's about. It's about the Valentine's Detective Agency, and those of you who have played Fallout 4 will know what that is. So needless to say, essentially what Fallout 4 has done is they've detailed what some of, and this is not all that's going to be included in the season pass. They have announced everything that's going to be included in the season pass up till and through May. And what they've essentially done at Bethesda is they realized, hey, we're actually going to be releasing way more content than we initially thought. And that's why they are raising the price of the season pass. If you buy it before March 1st, you will not be charged the $20 extra, which, I mean, is good of them. That's more of a, I guess, a PSA, you could say, is just if you do intend to buy the season pass, do so before March 1st, or else it is going to be going up an additional $20. Did you ever find what the name of that Fallout 3 expansion was?
I can't say I did. I found several DLCs, but none of them seem to have zombies in them.
I can remember all of them. They were Mothership Zeta with the aliens, Into the Pit, which took place in Pittsburgh, and then there's, the one. You all think I'm crazy. It exists. Anyway, that concludes our news segment. So we here at the station, here at WMCM, McAllister Radio, are going to be taking a break for a sec. But while I leave you, I am going to be playing for you, as I mentioned before, our Song of the Week. And since we're going to be talking a little bit, we already have talked a little bit about Bethesda, we figured, why not play one of the most, I don't know if it's critically acclaimed, but it's a pretty awesome song, Dragonborn from the Elder Scrolls Skyrim. You might have heard of that game. It came out a few years ago. And we are going to play that for you now. Anyway, enjoy. All right, and we're back with McAllister Radio WMCN. I am the Gaming Society Radio Hour host, James Goings, joined here with my fabulous guest,
Matthew Davids.
All right, we stuck the landing. Okay. By the way, for those of you who are joining us from earlier, after an intense Googling session, I managed to find, or I guess Matthew managed to relay toward me, that the DLC I was trying to think of was Point Lookout for Fallout 3, the only one I couldn't think of. And it does not take place in Maine. It takes place in Massachusetts.
Maryland, actually.
Well, no. Wait. Boston, Massachusetts, which is where Fallout 4 takes place. Maryland, or Point Lookout, takes place. And Maine, where Far Harbor takes place.
They all start with M. That is the key link.
And if you draw a line between them, they form a triangle. Do you know what this means, Matthew?
Half-Life 3 is coming out, is all I can assume.
No. Mr. Howard over at Bethesda is Illuminati confirmed and is developing Half-Life 3. Along with Left 4 Dead 3 and Team Fortress 3 and all of the other Valve games that haven't managed to add up to 3. Anyway, nerd jokes aside.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, the Half-Life 3 joke is a classic gamer joke because Half-Life 2 came out many years ago and was critically acclaimed and a fantastic game, and yet Half-Life 3 has still not come out, and we are all very disappointed.
Yep. So if you were one of those people who did not know what that means, you are now one of those people who knows what it means. And with that under our belts, that knowledge under our belts, Matt, let's move on to our main feature. And that is talking about DLC in video games. What exactly is the price of admission in gaming nowadays? Specifically, down to microscopically individual games. And the fact that Fallout 4, its season pass price has increased, is that setting a precedent and whatnot? I guess with that specific example, Bethesda recently has done a very good job of releasing quality DLC that I think is arguably, worth your money. It wasn't always this way. I'm sure many of you have heard of horse armor. Matthew, do you want to talk a little bit, for those of us who don't know, what exactly the horse armor incident is?
So horse armor was an incident. Which game was that again?
That was Oblivion.
Yeah,
So
okay.
this is okay. So we just played Dragonborn, which is the main theme from the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, which is made by Bethesda, which is developed by Bethesda, same as Fallout, and the Elder Scrolls game before Skyrim, again developed by Bethesda, was Oblivion, and this was in the early days of what exactly developers were still trying to figure out what exactly DLC was. What could you publish through DLC? What would people be willing to buy, and for what cost? So yeah, talk a little bit about horse armor.
So in this
Matthew?
particular case, one of the DLCs that Bethesda released, it was actually the first DLC for Oblivion, if I remember correctly, and it cost $2.50. And all it gave you was access to an item which was called horse armor, which appropriately gave you a set of armor for your horse.
Yes, Oblivion, and I mean most Bethesda games nowadays are open world. So having a horse is nice because that is a faster mode of transportation. Specifically, the Elder Scrolls series, which is more medieval in flavor, since there's no cars, you get around on thematically appropriate horses. And I suppose it's nice if your horse has armor so that it's a little less disposable. But, I mean, in this case, $2.50. And again, bearing in mind, this is the very first days of what DLC was. It's not what it is now. And I guess in this case we're putting special emphasis on the D in DLC, and that's downloadable. Is you could download this. People found it pretty ridiculous.
I mean, and as they should, it's $2.50 just for more or less a skin.
I mean, it wasn't exactly cosmetic. It had some functionality. I mean, it made it so that your horse could absorb slightly more damage, but it was pretty ludicrous. And Bethesda has since learned its lesson, I would say, culminating in what I guess I subjectively feel to be a very solid batch of DLC for Skyrim, the game that we just played a song from. They released Hearthfire for I don't actually remember exactly. It was not as much as, I mean, Dawnguard and Dragonborn were $15. Hearthfire was closer to $5, I believe.
If I recall, it was $5, yeah.
And you could build a house, which if you do not play on PC and cannot mod, that's a really nice addition if you play on console, which I do the majority of my gaming on. They released Dragonborn, which added an entirely new land with an entirely new culture and story quests to the main game. And they released Dawnguard, which added an entirely new faction and an entirely new quest line, entirely new NPCs to the game world. And those three releases were it for downloadable content. There was no cosmetic DLC for $1. There were no themes that you could pay money for. It was just three solid releases that all added a new level of depth to a game. And I guess that is what I consider to be a very strong DLC catalog for a game.
Well, I think that's actually a really good point. Because yes, those would be classified as really good DLCs, but I think the issue really comes between the difference between a DLC and an expansion, because those things really were more what I would classify as expansions. They added new levels, more or less. They added new areas of the world you could explore. They added a layer of depth to the game. These things they added like extra features to the game, more or less, whereas DLC I always saw as more of cosmetic types of things or like small items you might be able to get.
And I would argue, there's no fine. I mean, it is a fine line. There is no defined line between what is an expansion and what is a DLC. I would argue, yes, that expansions lend themselves to a more positive, have a more positive connotation. Firaxis, I believe, as a developer, the minds behind XCOM and Civilization, they have what exactly an expansion is down. Even going so far as, I mean, in the original, not the original, XCOM Enemy Unknown, I guess the reboot of the XCOM series, they released one expansion for it, and it was Enemy Within. And it so dramatically changed the way that the game was played in adding new systems and NPCs and enemy AI and missions and everything that if you own XCOM with the Enemy Within expansion, then in Firaxis' head, you own XCOM Enemy Within. It is no longer Enemy Unknown. It is a completely different game insofar as how dramatically it changes the way the game is played. Same situation with Civilization V, also developed by Firaxis. Civilization V, the newest game in the very popular Civilization game franchise, with the Brave New World expansion, the game is now Civilization V, A Brave New World. So Firaxis and Bethesda, I would argue, yes, have a very good understanding of what good DLC is and what makes an expansion as opposed to just downloadable content.
That is certainly overlooking one part of it, though, which is that when Skyrim's DLCs were first put out, they weren't exactly these fully polished creations. When Fallout 3's DLCs were put out, they weren't exactly these fully polished creations. And all of it, I mean, they still aren't today when it comes down to it. Fallout 3 was a buggy mess on release and still is. Fallout New Vegas was a buggy mess, although that was Obsidian.
That was developed by an outside source and just published through Bethesda. Yes, you're correct.
Fallout 4, also a buggy mess. Skyrim, Oblivion, Morrowind, all of these games, they're still not bug free. They still will glitch out. There are these bugs in Skyrim where NPCs will just be duplicated and you won't be able to finish quests and all these horrible things. And these expansions are the same thing. So when you're purchasing this season pass, you're getting all of these DLCs, sure, but what are you really getting? I mean, yes, you're getting the expansion, but how much of the expansion are you going to be able to play? How much are you going to be able to suffer through?
Yeah. Let's maybe talk, now that we've outlined what is good DLC, what are good expansions and stuff. You brought up the term Season Pass. And for those of you who don't know, what a Season Pass is all right, so let's say I bought, we're going to use a real example. I bought EA's new powerhouse, Star Wars Battlefront. That has a season pass. And when you buy a season pass, what that does is, theoretically, it entitles you to all subsequent DLC releases. And you buy it, usually, the idea behind a season pass is that you buy it before the actual DLC comes out. You can buy it retroactively, but the idea behind it is that you buy the game, and at the same time you buy the game, you buy the season pass, so that you don't have to worry about in the future buying every subsequent DLC release. And you've already paid for it all, and as soon as it comes out, it is available to you. That is the idea behind a season pass.
Now, what was the cost of the Battlefront season pass? Was it $50?
Yeah. Well, it depends entirely upon numerous things. Battlefield, EA, I guess I personally don't have the highest. I don't hold EA in the highest of regards.
Actually, excuse me. Were you talking about Battlefield and not Battlefront?
Oh, excuse me. No. Yes, let's be clear. I meant Battlefront. Battlefield is also an EA game. I was referring to Battlefront, the new Star Wars game that just came out this holiday season. Star Wars Battlefront, published by EA. Yes, let's be clear. Sorry about that. It was $50. And when developers and publishers, specifically I guess publishers in this case, what they're doing a lot now is they're not telling us what is coming out in our season passes. One of the very first games to include a season pass was L.A. Noire, which was published Was it published or it was developed by?
Yeah,
it was
Rockstar.
developed by Rockstar, the same people who bring you Grand Theft Auto. I don't know if you've heard of it. Somewhat of a popular franchise.
Or less popular among certain people.
Yes. Anywho, that was one of the very first games to include the now famous or infamous season pass format, and people weren't necessarily that excited at the prospect of pre-ordering your DLC, but at least they had a very clear, concise outline of what exactly was included in the season pass and when it's a broad timeline in terms of when it would release. Since then, a lot of games, a lot of AAA games, I guess I should say, have this season pass feature. And
You're calling it a feature now? You're shilling for them. LA Noire did it. Treated the system with a lot of respect in that they respected the people enough to tell them what was going to be in it and what exactly they were in for. When Battlefront, not Battlefield, when Battlefront announced that there would be a season pass, all they talked about was that there were going to be 4 digital expansion packs. Okay. Really clear, really understandable
Okay.
what 4 digital expansion packs means.
There was, I believe, no time frame. When are we going to be receiving these? What are these 4 different map packs? Because, I mean, part of it, I feel a lot of publishers would argue that what they're trying to do is they're trying to make it a surprise when the DLC finally does drop. And do we want that to be a surprise? I would argue no. I want to know what I'm going to be getting when I purchase a season pass, especially since a lot of games that that sell us season passes aren't what you get in the season pass is often not story based. Battlefront, you order the season pass, you receive map packs. This is a multiplayer game. I believe Battlefront is an entirely multiplayer game. Is that correct?
Yeah, Battlefront is actually entirely multiplayer, which has come at the chagrin of many people. Most people, when they heard that Battlefront was coming out, it was sort of the reboot of this franchise that everyone had really, really loved many years ago. And it came out, and it's actually sort of a lesser version of that old game, Battlefront 2. I mean, yes, it's this very pretty game, but people have had a lot of problems with Battlefront already. If I recall, there's only, I think, 2 game modes that people are willing to play at this time.
Yeah. I mean, to the credit of DICE, which is the developer, the people who actually made the Star Wars Battlefront game, I remember watching a lot of the dev diaries that would be posted to YouTube as the creative process was fleshing out for this game. And I was very excited because they were treating the Star Wars franchise with just an amazing amount of reverence. They had a lot of respect for the franchise, and that does show through in the game. When you're playing the game, you feel like you're in Star Wars, that you are a part of this universe. But that isn't what makes a good game. Anyway, we're getting off on a tangent here, talking about multiplayer versus single-player games. This is a topic for another show, and believe me, we do plan on having this conversation, probably with you, Matt, actually. Anyway.
One thing that we can, however, say about Battlefront that is relevant to this situation is what DLC does to the player base.
Yes.
And in Battlefront's case, and in many multiplayer games' cases, I remember this happening in Titanfall, in Halo 3, in Call of Duty. This is a very common theme where there'll be these essentially multiplayer-only games. I know Call of Duty is technically not, and neither is Halo 3, but a lot of the player base was not only playing single-player. They were mostly playing multiplayer and mostly bought the games for that. And so these DLCs would come out, these map packs would come out, these game modes would come out, and in doing so, there would be a portion of people that would have the map pack, and there'd be a portion of people that didn't. And so some people just couldn't play with other people, and then another map pack would come out, and then there would be 3 groups of people, and then another map pack would come out, and all this time, just the player base is getting split and split and split until eventually you can't find games. Everybody assumes that the game is dead, but it's not. It's just you can't play with other people who haven't paid the money in order to play the game with you.
Yeah, and especially, do you remember Call of Duty Elite? I don't know. That was the subscription service that you could pay for Call of Duty in addition to, at the time, if you played on Xbox, playing for an Xbox Live Premium membership. There was a huge divide of Xbox users would get the DLC months before PlayStation 3 users. And when Call of Duty Elite, that subscription service, and I guess we can talk about that because it's a subscription service, much like the season passes in terms of the way this content is delivered to us. You would get the content even sooner if you subscribed, paid money to Call of Duty Elite. And then there was the level of, I play Xbox, but I don't have Call of Duty Elite. And then there's a level of you're just out of luck if you play on PlayStation, which unfortunately I did. And yeah, I mean, what it does is it causes a huge divide in the player base of, is the community dead? Is it alive? Well, if you're fortunate enough to, I guess I put air quotes around the word fortunate, if you're fortunate enough to own any of this DLC, well then, yeah, maybe you'll be able to find someone, maybe not. So, I mean, that's really unfortunate.
But not all games put out DLC that costs money. There are a lot of companies out there which have produced free DLC for multiplayer, which I think is personally the best possible method because it keeps people playing the multiplayer. It keeps things fresh. That way they can always, have something to look forward to. Maybe next month you're releasing a DLC which will include a few more maps that you can play, but everybody can do it because it's free.
Oh, absolutely.
And so it doesn't cost money.
I remember the Portal 2, I think, is a great example of that, where the entire cooperative mode was released for free after the game came out. You're looking at me like that's not true.
No, I just didn't know that.
I am almost positive you're looking at me like that's not true. Maybe it's not. Okay. While Matt fact checks me on that, I'm going to roll with having said that as though it were true. And I guess moving on to other games. Dying Light is a great example of a developer releasing continuous free DLC in the form of updates as a way of, poking the fire with a stick, keeping the fire alive, and keeping the fan base excited. Now, Matthew, can I make a bit of a controversial statement here on the radio here in terms of DLC?
I'm worried.
Okay. I am going to defend cosmetic DLC. Are you? I don't think this is inherently a bad thing, right?
No, it's not inherently a bad thing.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, in most cases, I actually think that it's a fantastic way for many free-to-play games to be able to actually make money while still being able to...
well, I'm not even necessarily saying free-to-play. I'm talking about if you want to, make your gun rainbow in Call of Duty.
Oh, no, okay. I'll rescind a previous statement where I said that the horse armor was absolutely ridiculous. It wasn't. It was just a cosmetic DLC. I would say putting it at $2.50 to make one horse wear some armor for free and then having to pay 500 gold for every other horse that you want to have armor. I think that was a little bit ridiculous. I would say that cosmetic DLC in most cases is done well. In Call of Duty, I think it's 99 cents in order to buy a gun skin.
Yeah. And for what it's worth, when we say all subsequent release, when you buy a season pass, all subsequent DLC releases are included for free. Cosmetic DLC is almost always usually an exception. That you usually still have to buy, even with the season pass, you usually still have to buy that a la carte.
What do you think about the extreme case of cosmetic DLC, like League of Legends?
Well, I guess I'm not a huge player of real-time online League of Legends kind of stuff like that. MOBAs. As I said, I am not a huge player of the MOBAs. I know what it stands for.
Oh yeah, what does it stand for?
Multiplayer Online Battle Arena.
Well done.
Okay. The point that I was going to make with cosmetic DLC not being inherently bad is that's a really good way for the developers to get some really easy cash back on their investment. Because what I mean by that is the fact that, I mean, you're only going to buy the cosmetic DLC if you feel really strongly about owning that specific cosmetic DLC. So if you buy it, that's a win for you because you really wanted it and so you purchased it. It's a win for the developers because they're getting some really easy cash back. And what it does is it helps subsidize the cost of huge AAA titles in terms of how much money is having to go in. If there's sort of a constant return of revenue that is, ridiculously high in that, maybe only took 1 man-hour in order to put out a DLC that turns your clothes red. But if I feel really strongly about turning my clothes red, I mean, I'd buy that DLC. And it's a really good way for developers to be able to get a fairly sizable return on the investment, of 1 man-hour.
There's something I just want to point out about these cosmetic DLCs. Typically speaking, they don't actually they take considerably longer than 1 man-hour because not only does someone have to code it, someone has to do the art for it. People put a lot of effort into this, but one of the reasons why you see so much of this cosmetic DLC showing up is that the artists don't actually do much work sort of towards the latter stages of production because the artists do sort of the concept stuff at the beginning and they have drawings for the programmers, and then sort of towards the end, the game is mostly designed. They just need to sort of fix some bugs, do QA, and so at that point, the artists go, "Hey, you know what? Maybe I could have an idea. I have an idea for what could be a really cool cosmetic thing." And then everyone's like, "Oh, that would be fantastic. Give us a prototype. We'll put that in the game at some point. It'll be great."
Yeah, that's especially evident in games where, such as Evolve, where you've got this really elaborate monster that you're going to be fighting against in an arena, and this really elaborate monster, and you can get a new skin for it. I mean, I understand that it takes much more than 1 man-hour. The point that I was trying to make is it's not very intensive for the developers to be able to include these as DLC. And the amount of money that they get back on that is probably much higher than if they were to release an expansion, which while maybe it revolutionizes the way that the game is played, it would have taken much, much more effort in order to be able to release that for consumption. If that makes sense. And while we're talking about Evolve, and this is kind of cycling back to an earlier topic, Matt, do you still play Evolve?
I don't think anyone still plays Evolve.
Does anyone still play Evolve? Evolve, to its credit, was a really cool idea. The whole idea of unbalanced multiplayer. The way that the game is set up is that you've got 4 hunters and 1 monster. All the hunters are on the same team and the monsters on the other team. The concept behind unbalanced multiplayer was a really interesting concept, but a lot of people stopped playing it because there's only so much you can do with that. There were 2 season passes for Evolve.
2 season passes.
There were 2 season passes.
What were they for?
They were the different season passes included different hunters and different monsters. It's not like one was a season pass for monsters and one was a season pass for hunters. They were just 2 season passes. One season pass ran its course, and no one really knew that there were going to be 2, especially, well, I should say, the consumers didn't know that there was going to be a second one. If you bought the season pass, you probably thought you were good. Why would you not assume that? I mean, as far as I know, there hasn't been any other game with 2 season passes. They just decided to release another, and that goes back to just the idea of the developers know what's going to be in it. They are not telling you because they don't know. The developers know because it takes time to create this content. They're just not telling us. And whether it's to keep it as a surprise or whatever their reasons are, I, for one, would just prefer to know ahead of time when I'm going to be buying this season pass.
I mean, but that's because season passes are more or less pre-ordering. You're just pre-ordering the DLC versus pre-ordering the game. And people still think that pre-ordering is kind of a terrible idea. You don't know what the game's going to look like when it comes out because, yes, they've made a bunch of promises. And again, the developer can make lots of promises on the DLCs, but when it comes down to it, when the game actually comes out, when the DLC comes out, are you really going to be getting what they said that you paid for?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Pre-ordering a game, very similar to buying a season pass, especially when you buy it before any of the DLC actually drops.
So do you play any free-to-play games, James?
I might have Team Fortress 2 on my laptop or Clash of Clans on my iPad, but that's just about it.
So what can you tell me about the pay structure in Clash of Clans?
Oh, well. I'm a little biased, of course, because I play and actually do enjoy Clash of Clans for the social element. Those are often referred to as pay-to-win games, even though you don't really win in Clash of Clans. There is no end game. It's more of a build your base, attack other people's base, build your base more so that your base is better than other people's bases, and it just sort of builds on from there. Usually the way that those games work is there's a currency for buying houses and fences and troops that you can earn in-game easily, and then there's a currency that you can buy with real money. With in-app purchases.
And this currency, if I recall, is it emeralds? Is that what it is?
In Clash of Clans, the premium currency, the currency that you need to buy with real money, those are gems.
Gems.
Yes, they are gems.
And so if I recall with those, they just skip the timer. Is that correct?
Yes.
So everything in Clash
yes.
of Clans is time-based. You want to build a house. Okay, so you click Build House, you spend the in-game currency, and then you wait.
Yes, a lot of mobile pay-to-win games are based around waiting.
And so if you're able to skip that time with just sort of clicking, buy with real money and then using the gems, what ends up happening is you can just sort of skip all of the base game parts and just skip all the way into. So if you spend enough money, more or less, you become the best. You become the absolute highest tier possible. You have all of the houses. You can create all of the barbarians you want and just throw them at your enemies. Because Clash of Clans is actually, it's sort of a. I mean, it's inherently a multiplayer game. You are competing against other clans around the world, and so if you pay enough money, you can become the best clan.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I mean, that's Clash of Clans very specifically, and in its defense, I feel does a really good job of it's very much a social game, more so than a multiplayer game, because you have a clan and you have friends that you play with. But yes, I mean, your claims are absolutely correct. In terms of, yes, you can wait for years and years patiently, or you can pay ludicrous amounts of money, as it were, if you wanted to, I guess, finish the game in terms of build all the houses and whatnot. You could pay to have that happen with real money.
Right. Now, I brought that up to sort of go over the second point, which was the price of admission. And sort of the price of admission in this case is money. Or it could be time. If you're willing to spend thousands of hours and slowly build up your houses, you can get to the same place. Mm-hmm. But most people aren't really willing to spend all that much time.
No. Yeah, that's fair. It's definitely not for everyone. I just happen to have some friends that I have spent thousands of hours playing with, and it manages to be a good time. Our show's just about over, so what we're going to do last is we're each going to pitch a game that we are currently playing that, we'd like to see other people play because Matt and I find these to be good quality games that also just so happen, as if it were a coincidence, but it's not, it was planned to tie in to our current theme, and that is DLC and the price of admission. My pitch for a game that I feel like we should all be playing is Dying Light. And what Dying Light is it's the spiritual successor to Dead Island. If you ever happened to see that teaser trailer, that as soon as it released, they announced that they would be making a movie because this trailer was just so gosh darn good. The game Dying Light is fantastic in that, as I said, the developers at Techland have been periodically releasing free DLC in the form of updates and have recently announced that they will be... This game came out almost a year ago, but they recently announced that they're going to be continuing to support this game well into 2016. And I imagine it's going to be largely in the same way that it has been in the form of free updates. So... beyond that, it's a quality game. It's got zombies and parkour, so what more could you possibly want? That is my pitch. Matthew, do you have a game that you would personally like to recommend?
Absolutely. So the game that I'd like to recommend is Life is Strange. It's sort of in the realm of those Telltale games like Walking Dead, which sort of, it's entirely story-based. There are light puzzles. They're very rarely there. And the whole plot of the game sort of revolves around this girl, Max, who is a photography student and learns at some point that she can rewind time. This isn't a spoiler. It's a main game mechanic, trust me. And it's sort of a story of understanding her life, understanding what this power means. It's sort of a really realistic adaptation of what it would be like if you did just sort of wake up and have superpowers someday. Not only that, but just the voice acting in this game is probably the best voice acting I've ever heard in my life in any video game. It's really, really special.
Ooh. Sometime we're going to have to talk about Last of Us then.
And then DLC-wise, you can buy the entire season, or the entire 5 episodes for a season pass type thing.
And again, thank you, Matt, for another excellent segue. Next week, join us again, same time on WMCN McAllister Radio at 6. Join us next week on the McAllister Gaming Society radio show when we will be talking about episodic gaming and how that works from a developing standpoint and how the consumers feel about that, or I guess mostly just how I feel about that and Matt feels about that. Anyway, thank you again for an amazing first show here, and have a good night.
Good night.